Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, in my continuing research and looking into, which I have been doing on and off for many years, the saga of the Bruce Copeland, his business, and what happened after his death. Yet another radionic practitioner that died fairly young. And this is because all radionic instruments have a kickback, and they tend to, when you're uh, contacting other energy fields, the energy is then an exchange. It's this quantum understanding of everything being connected, and you're drawing to it and accessing those energies, which you're taking them in. So this is quite common. I'm not sure if everybody in this industry is like most people, they're so busy helping others they don't help themselves. This certainly is something that is happening to most people, and it's the same with me. I'm too busy doing so much that I don't have enough time to take care of myself the way I should. I'm trying to change that. But there's several issues with Bruce Copen, and what's happened right now is that there's a whole bunch of people who are capitalizing on his name. Now, apparently, from what we can tell, Bruce Copen made a fortune with these machines. He jazzed them all up, made them very complicated, made them look like complicated medical machines, and added the price tag to them so that they would get that. Certainly, he was a very interesting man. I think he understood energies, but like everyone else, even though it's been proven that this has absolutely nothing to do with the electromagnetic energies, fell into that because that's the only, quote, credible thing out there. Now, real researchers, when you get into it, all understand that this energy, including someone who's given a lot of credit, Hieronymus, stated that this is not an electromagnetic energy. You cannot measure it properly to keep the pseudoscientists out there. You know, the guys that either make toxic technologies or can't figure that now. Where am I? Well, we're going to make, to solve energy, we're going to make nuclear power. So it's hard to take in. The problem is all the alternative people in the industry are just as bad and may even be worse. They live in a fantasy world and don't understand the science that's out there. Now, it is a complicated field. I can't spend all my time researching what other people have done. I generally don't do a lot of that. I've done it for 40 years to some degree, but I like to find my own discoveries, and I don't like to be prejudiced to what the energies are and think about them based on other people's research, which are basically bogus and misunderstood. I've reached a level that I get it. And I'm the only expert in this field on the planet and really have been for the last 30 years. Everybody else really is doing the same old garbage, producing the same old stuff and getting virtually no results. It's a bunch of garbage, little boxes with computers on them. It's just nonsense. And we don't know what they cost. Call up and find out. What's the price of the day? So the whole idea is this is the kind of very despicable people that are in this industry and pretty much everywhere. But, you know, alternative science and healing people should be more aware of the fact of what's going on so they don't fall into those traps. But we all know that's never going to happen because all people are pretty scummy. And they're all connected to base energies and evilness. Simple as that, and it's proven. All you have to do is go on YouTube and follow some of these practitioners and listen to their nonsense and how they're sitting next to well-known Satanists, or as was done with E.A. Kenneding, the most well-known modern Satanist, who stated that Carl Weltz was his mentor, and he learned black magic and all the evil stuff he possibly could from Carl Weltz, and of course, his orgonite garbage. Toxic, horrible stuff. But of course, he was propped up there. He was given support, lots of money, and other people of many types, including myself, were made sure they were marginalized, so you really didn't get good quality anything. Part of this process is the con that, of course, we get from Bruce Copeland's labs, or Bruce Copeland based in Germany. apparently, and we just don't know the relationship again. As he said, I'm hoping someday, but to have some time to do actually interviews or even call people on the phone. I'm not sure how much they're open to all this. Probably not. Probably they're as corrupt as everybody else and don't want to really talk about the facts with someone who is the expert on the planet. They prefer to get their information from bogus, controlled liars who basically they're all bought off one way or another. So, what happened is that the Bruce Copen units, originally, I'm assuming this guy in Germany, and he claims everything that Bruce Copen did, and then claims it's with 70 years. I mean, he wasn't in business 70 years. He's going back to the beginning of Bruce Copeland's business. And we have to understand that anything coming from Germany, the most notorious crook nation, the most evilest people that copy everything and invented nothing, are going to steal everything they possibly can. And of course, they've done this through their long history, with the most criminal corporations on the planet being German and the most biggest criminals being German out there for basically hundreds of years. It's quite amusing. So I don't know how the Germans seem to be able to con people while they pick your pocket, and I'm not sure why. But the illusion that these very ignorant, uneducated, in any kind of alternativeness, the sloppy, incompetent people that Germans are, that you think is so much better, has permeated the world with their filth and stink, and they rob and rape everybody. And of course, they're the only trade with the German is going from them to you, because there's no fair trade with any of it. So you're not going to see any non-German products in Germany except a few EU products, and you're not going to see that. Yet we have their filth all over the United States that they have imported, their candy bars, their crappy beer, all the stuff that is there. And a German goes someplace and he builds a little town and store, names everything, speaks his own language, and takes over as much as he can, setting up their criminal operations wherever they go. Americans can't. Can I learn your language? Can I eat the garbage you have here because we're so inferior? So this is the problem with the world. But of course, this is highlighted by, of course, Bruce Copen's connection with these people and allowing them really to take all of his technology. Now, I don't think I'm not sure if Copen ever used them as a distributor and was building the equipment. Certainly should. You got to remember that the United Kingdom, and where basically Copen's laboratories were, is probably 200 or 300 miles away. You know, in California, that's the difference between Los Angeles and San Francisco. So, you know, you wouldn't necessarily set up a separate factory that way. And of course, you got to remember that trade and everything else until the UK dropped out of the EU. There were no taxes or anything else to do. So there wasn't really a concern there. So I'm not sure what the agreement was there or not. So we have a lot of strange things happening at Copen. Now, there are instruments being made in the United States and apparently in Mexico, probably in Tijuana. And there's somebody living in San Diego who I think I know about who does some strange stuff and, of course, is a person that seems to be disconnected, who is building all the Copen instruments. And he also has them being built in, apparently, Tijuana. So they are pushing the Copen stuff as it is in the analog and some of it in this new computerized. Now, you got to remember that Copen wanted to mark everything and highlight it, even when the technology was not there, using the term computer. And of course, this has been done forever. You know, now everything's AI. And of course, back then it was computers, even before computers were all that popular, but it certainly was not an unknown term, as some people want to tell you. So he liked to do that. And why did he want to do that? So he could charge a lot of money for his products and make them more credible to the really bogus medical industry that does nothing. But, you know, it's all about appearance, because there's absolutely nothing in Bruce Copen's units of any value whatsoever. Their tuning circuits are the same tuning circuits that have been used for 120 years. There's no new wiring. There's no new anything. He did come up with a few new concepts that he claims, but he's using, again, electromagnetics, which has nothing to do with this field. And we have to understand that and all the things that go with that. So these, quote, electromagnetic and frequencies, well, there's different types of frequencies as well. I just had this pointed out to me recently by doing a little bit of research that people like Royal Raymond Rife did not use frequencies that we consider frequencies. He used radio frequencies. Now, this is quite a difference. And they've been using radio frequencies for many years to project energies at people for healing and for common things. So this is interesting when we understand that, because it's not just a frequency generator. So these have to be RF frequencies to be broadcast out there. So, and again, we just don't know how well any of this worked. Ultimately, I've just read recently that Rife died, of course. If you have something good and you're going against an establishment, he died penniless with being very discouraged that his technology wasn't embraced, and rightfully so, including his microscope and other things. And nobody does anything because they're all under pressure. Everybody's greedy and they're all controlled. I don't think anybody in this industry is controlled by nefarious forces and are not getting bought off. They all are. And of course, anybody that knows anything about the German rigged system, where 1,300 families own everything, and these 1,300 families are controlled by organized crime, has to understand that. Everything in Germany has been owned for hundreds of years by the same criminal families, and they get government financing from the huge taxes that the population pays, the 80 plus million citizens of Germany, and everything they extort from the rest of the world is filtered down into business. Recently, I just heard from my email provider, who is out of Germany, that they were just given $5 million out of the blue to develop things. Yeah, well, we know why that happened, including the fact of buying them, especially since they can then harass people like myself by stealing and watching everything like they do all the time. Of course, it's all illegal in Germany, except when you're the criminals that run the country, which are all criminals. So the whole idea is that people don't understand that. So they're constantly filtering money. There's constantly giant construction projects going on that have no use whatsoever and cost 10 times the amount. They like to blame the Russians for this. And what was it, $20,000 for every seat they put in the Olympic arena there? Well, that goes on pretty much all over the world, but certainly it's notoriously done in Germany, where they build structures that are particularly useless and millions of dollars go there. This is all part of the government buying off and keeping things in control. They'll go into a town, they'll build things that are completely unnecessary, spend a lot of money there, like they did locally with me, where they put a giant soccer stadium in there, not a giant one, but a local one for the people, and put up giant fences, added in buildings. And this is all a criminal place where the criminals go. And that money, of course, was filtered through the town. It's very interesting that that is not used. It was used for about 6 to 8 months or a year, and now it's never used again. Same old story. It never needed to be done. And it wasn't done for 20 or 30 years that the original soccer little park for the Locolos was there. So this is the kind of nonsense that goes on. And if so many people don't understand that. And the fake image of competency and honesty that's put out by the biggest crooks on this planet, who have been the biggest crooks for 200 years, who basically are nothing more than Iranians. That's where they come from. That's what an Aryan is something that people just don't get. But whatever, keep digging into and supporting your little Satanists that build toxic orgone and all the crap they have. But apparently, and unfortunately for Bruce Copen, didn't get any of this stuff, was foolishly allowing people to take his designs and use his name, as they're doing today. Now, the people in England have gotten into a little bit of a push and pull match, as they have posted on their website in the UK, how the Germans are talking about them and lying about them and claiming that they're not doing anything right. And of course, the contrived made up garbage that is produced through their electronic industry that they claim they build locally somewhere outside of Munich which I frankly doubt. Almost everything here is built in China. There's very few, if anything, done. The rich families want to stay rich and they don't pay anybody. Some of the lowest wages in Europe are in Germany. So people have to understand that, but you don't get that. This is a country that can't even pick up their trash. I mean, it's really pathetic. And their notification system to the local fire department and everybody else are sirens. This is the high techie you get from the Deutschies. So, all of this is part of it, and the Copen, this company, is playing off what Copen did, claiming they've been in business 70 years. They've never been in business 70 years. What is that nonsense? This all goes back to Bruce Copeland himself and claiming everything that Bruce Copeland did as theirs. It's so typically German because the Germans have invented nothing. They have put together nothing. Their engineering is garbage. Anybody that knows anything about that, from Porsches to VWs, this is garbage technology. Anybody that's ever owned a Porsche knows how uncomfortable they are, how noisy they are. They're just boxes of crap for a lot of money. And that goes for pretty much anything you're going to get from Germany, which is an inferior product, along with their inferior Middle Eastern thinking. And of course, the country is full of their companions now, as they're bringing in over millions and millions of Iranians and Arabs to fill the country up so that they can all harmonize together, because that's what they are. And everybody should get that in their pea brain. But what they're doing is they're claiming their stuff is built in Germany, while they, which from the Copeland people in the UK state that their stuff is built in China, which I tend to believe. You can't believe anything that you get from a German because all their companies are crooked. The horrendous atrocities that Volkswagen committed during the Second World War, where hundreds of children were murdered in their, quote, nursery. The fact that Monsanto is now owned by the Germans is just kind of apropos that such a scummy company, which probably had German roots to begin with, is now fully owned by the criminal Bayer Corporation. All the major corporation and criminals that we can point to today, including Nestle Corporation, a horrible criminal operation, and this can all be defined and is taught by third parties, so it has nothing to do with me, of course, are these, quote, Iranic people, these Iran people. Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and so many other, which are all part of the Axis powers in World War II. And yes, the Swiss they were nothing more than Nazi bankers. And they preserved the money for the Nazis to function properly. Let's get real. So the whole idea is we have to understand all that stuff that goes on. There really was only two allied countries, France and the UK and the United States. All the rest were German allies, people like Finland, who actually fought for the Nazis, like Ukraine. So the whole idea is all those things that go on have to be understood. So they are building these machines, claiming everything is theirs that Bruce Copen did, and they're putting out their particularly crappy model of the Mars units. They're up to Mars 3 now. It certainly is off-planet and wacky. Well, the Mars units have been outlawed to be imported into the United States by the FDA as quack technology. The fact that they think they can, again, have an electronic box of nothingness, but again, it looks impressive. It looks high tech, following something that Copen did. He put all this stuff in there, made these little credit cards you insert in there, and all this is supposed to do something, and it doesn't. All this is just gimmicky stuff sold to a bunch of pseudo-intellectual people who are either wealthy or doctors that are looking for something different. And of course, they don't have the intellectual value to know what works. As I've stated, the research that's been done by people that don't use any instrumentation and are using their own methods are shockingly high. Well, none of the information comes out from Copen. Copen won't give you any statistical data on how this stuff works. Now they do have rate books and everything else, and it's the same old story from, of course, these illegal medical tools, which are not legal in Germany, by the way, but it's all part of the con. This company has been given probably tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions, Very similar to the rAdionic Corporation, who I allege again has been gotten all this public money and everything else. And they just disappeared after building all these complicated frequency units. And again, what frequencies are they using? They have complicated rate books. And of course, it's sweeping the world to cure people. So all this instantaneous and the ability, as I talked about in a recent video, that you can somehow analyze fields, the equipment and sensitivity of instruments aren't there. We are giving bogus information. You cannot detect all that stuff. As I said, this gets down to the Elizabeth Holmes reality, where you can take a spot of blood and then be able to analyze it to a particular high level, and that there are machines that actually can do it. Well, the point is she got into big trouble with that because what she stated couldn't happen. So the whole idea to think that you can hook up an electronic machine to somebody can tell you your blood functioning is absurd. There's nothing to do it. Aura cameras, all this stuff. You're picking up pretty much energy going through meridians, which are semi-electric, and then trying to interpret them. So the computer program interprets them and then kicks out some information. This information has never been verified. Nobody is printing any information to verify how great their results are. This company loves to use hair analysis, which again is something that is interesting, but we just don't know. You know, hair generally has energy in it. It's kind of dead, even though this site claims that hair lives for 2 or 3 years after you cut it off. I don't know if that's true. They're talking about energetically, and again, who's checking that? So, energetic fields probably last forever. I mean, some people think that the energy fields from ever, meaning if you wanted to look at the dinosaurs, their energy is still popping around this environment. You just have to figure out a way to access that the energy has never really gone, which is interesting, and probably there's some truth to that. But the bottom line is there's really no data there, and these new Mars machines are on the FDA's list of quack tools. And of course, we all know that this certainly is true. And the fact of trying to use these computerized junk to achieve what? Well, where are all the results? Where are all the proof? Now, apparently, this company is still building some of the older equipment as well. And again, I'm not going to spend hours and hours going through this, but I did just recently come into contact with the statement that the FDA has outlawed the Mars units. And these are illegal to import because they're quacks. They don't do anything. And the point is on their website, there's nothing shown there as well. So this is, again, so we've got these guys in the U.S., one guy in San Diego, who I think was recently selling on eBay a Hieronymus-type Kelly machine, is probably that person doing it. So he lives in San Diego. He goes across the border into Mexico, has some things made there, and apparently he makes some stuff himself, and he's making all the analog stuff, I believe, that was made before. He's got a few tabletop models, and of course, he's always been involved in that. And the Copen company has always been pretty hostile to anybody outside, except for the people that are the traitors, the liars, and everybody else who apparently Copen had a good relationship with the scum of Europe, who murdered generations of people and are trying to take over yet again, and have been trying to do this for 200 years. And of course, you can always link problems around the world to the infection of the Germans, who are absolutely everywhere, building their cities in Argentina, and all the millions of people they murdered in Latin America as well. It's all part of that everybody looks the other way for, and with their pseudo-intellectual garbage that they build, because there's nothing that comes from Germany that has any quality whatsoever. It's all overpriced nonsense that they have lied to you about. Their crappy beer, which is bitter and low quality. Anybody that knows anything about beer knows how bad German beer is. And of course, you believe differently because you've been programmed by the great Satan evilness of the Germans to believe that. So as we get involved with all these things, we know this as this company, again, portrays a bunch of nonsense. The fact of these, quote, frequency instruments and what kind of frequencies they are and where's their proof and where is all this stuff. So the point is that regular frequencies in the cycles per second, they're figuring out that they can do this all automatically with the machine. And of course, typically overpriced garbage that you get from the Germans, $5,000, $10,000 and more for some of these machines. All this stuff is the same old story. Now, they claim, of course, again, they're claiming all the sales that Copen himself did with the years that he was in business, that they have sold over 70,000 Copen machines. Which is quite impressive, and I guess this means, I guess this adds up to why Copen had a Rolls Royce, but apparently didn't have any structure or any fairly bad business sense, period. I mean, I don't think his organization was run well ever, and he aligned himself with a bunch of bad people in general. His distributors in the United States are always kind of stooges. And I remember this in the 90s, that all their equipment was difficult to get and certainly was not anything special out there. But a lot of people who had that extra money, that 5, 6 grand or more, bought these because they look so official. I remember talking to one bogus radionic practitioner who's been around for years, how she thought all this stuff was so wonderful. When, of course, it wasn't, and neither was anything that she ever did. I mean, again, bad radionic people that know absolutely nothing, and then they get caught up with worse people. So the fact that this is where that went to, so there's a conflict between the new British people and the fact of what the Germans, who are criticizing them, saying they're the only real company. Yeah, they went in and stole the Copen brand name, stole everything that they could from them, and now they're trying to put out of business the British people. Now, I'm not sure what's happening with the U.S. people, but I have no love for them either. You got to remember, all this tech is just garbage. It's overpriced, fancy-looking junk. And it's as simple as that. The tunings in them, and we'll be going through these, but, I'm not sure if I'm going to be offering this to the general public. I paid a lot of money for this pile of crap, and if you want to look inside of it, you need to be a member of our All Access and Patreon, which is certainly very inexpensive to be able to see what's inside these things and get a lot of information you're not going to find anywhere else. I'm the only person who's taken apart all these machines and have all of them. Which will be on sale soon. So people that are looking for this kind of tech and others, I am going to be selling a bunch of this stuff. I have no use for it. I've looked at it. It's the same old garbage. I don't need this complicated 30 dials, 50 dials. Yeah, that's impressive for whom? But you're not really dialing these. It still has the old rub plates. There's no proper tuning done. There's a lot of fancy turd polishing going on here. And no real tech. And Copen really didn't know anything. He didn't have a background in any of this stuff. And as I said, his machines look cool and they look very official. And if you're going to charge $10,000, $12,000 for something, you can't really have 2 dials on it. So it has to look official, and that's what they've done. Or you're going to have to move into the automatic spectrum where you make something like the Mars unit, which looks very high-techy and can analyze and do everything. Isn't that amazing? Yet nobody uses any of this junk anywhere in the world that I'm familiar with. Apparently, a lot of third world people may use this because they are not pressurized. But I've never heard of anybody using any of this technology in their practices, as there is no bioresonance, which is another type of this. Again, which this company, rAdionic, which built a big giant business park and everything else. And where did all that money come from something that's not known? Well, it comes from, as usual, all the government funding that all these people get to create a bunch of industries that basically launder a bunch of money, is really what it comes down to. And people are paid huge amounts of money from their illegal dealings or taken from their taxpayers, with 20% is your average sales tax, including food that is taxed in Germany, 7%. I've shown people these. You don't find that anywhere else in the world. So they have huge amounts of money that they take from their own people, who, by the way, they pay very little in the bigger picture, and particularly recently, where everything is farmed out everywhere else. And of course, government, these companies don't pay hardly any taxes. And it's all rigged, and it's all about making their own products and making sure that nobody else's products come in. So, all of that that goes with the entire process is has to be understood, and you don't understand it because you are just ignorant of the industry. And most people don't want to bother with anything that's the truth. They just want to hear stuff that's warm and fuzzy and makes them feel good. I heard that from a bogus woman who thought it was perfectly fine for people to be rotten, evil Satanists, and I look for the good things in people. The scum out there. And that's all of the people in almost all industries as they are exploited and horrible, particularly the Nestle Corporation, which is one of the most giant corporate criminals there are. And this goes with the whole industry, including Volkswagen, which has been fined billions of dollars, who tried to, because they have such crappy technology and can't build anything right, they had to rig their cars for the smog or the air pollution standards that they can't meet, particularly in the United States, because they don't have any technology. They have the same old crap they've been building for years. And the Volkswagen Beetle, one of the garbagest cars ever made, particularly the ones that came out in the 60s and 70s that all the white trash bought because they were so cheap. Yeah, because they are a park bench in a little aluminum shell. That's all they are. And your face is pressed against the windshield. Ah, great German engineering. We made it look like a bubble of garbage, and then we made everything look like a shoebox. So this is the kind of things that have been going on for years. So we've got to understand what's going on in the world and what's been perpetrated on the public in all sectors of life. And of course, anytime we get into this area, and this area in general, and of course, pretty much alternative everything, because I found alternative healers in general are very, very greedy, nasty people. They want to make their money and they don't help anybody. They're just as bad as doctors. So I don't have much use for them, and I don't know what they've ever done. And from what I understand, their facilities and these alternative people in Mexico, all of these facilities were pretty nasty, poorly built, nothing invested in them to make things well either. So that's a general statement. Who knows in individual places? And of course, they're pushing without any background whatsoever, this company, of how great engineering that they know nothing about. I mean, what do the Germans know about subtle energies to begin with? I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's no background in this whatsoever. Their machines, while they're just plastic junk with crappy circuit boards, which have all sorts of toxic metals in them and other toxic ingredients that they then say they can have 60,000 simulated remedies in there, simulated by their fantasy computer programmers that are putting out some sort of coded number to represent whatever was in there. And you know, the key to everything, and this is why I always have a problem with people. I had one bogus boob contact me saying that he was using a biofeedback program through his telephone. And, you know, I've heard this from many people. Well, I can computerize it. We'll just make it. I said, what are you talking about? You have to put energy into it. How is the energy going to enter a device if you don't have some sort of energy that goes into it? And how are you going to do that with a phone app? And you're certainly not going to do that even with all the things they claim they can do with these analyzing of pictures and your fingerprint. Well, that's all wonderful, but this is crude tech. When you want to try and pick up the actual energies, you need to have very specific and special sensing devices. Now, this particular tool that they're putting out has sensing devices that you put your hands on. And again, what kind of sensing is that? Well, you're getting into the galvanic response. There are some there. And the fact is that you're not able to analyze this in any great fashion. This comes back to that drop of blood that's going to give you all these great results. That's going to be super easy to do. That came out to be a fraudulent fantasy. Now, this is the same thing. It's really sad that companies like this are allowed to get away with this stuff. But of course, we know they get away with that in certain countries. I don't think anybody should get away with that. I mean, to be stating this. And of course, they're mixing things. They don't really know what the energy, it's a frequency. What kind of frequency? What is the frequency? Is it a sine wave? Is it a square wave? What frequencies are we talking about here? Frequencies that tended to do things that devices were made of were RF frequencies, radio frequencies. This is what was done, and these were projected. But radio frequencies were also the things that were thought to be so special back when radio just happened, and Rife was working on his stuff in the 20s and 30s. So it was very special back then. But it does make a certain sense that you're using a radio frequency, something that you project at something that enters and connects to another electromagnetic system, which is kind of what you have. Now, you are a liquid battery, which is the way you work on a primitive level. And if you turn that battery off and you turn off the electromagnetic firing of your brain waves, you cease to exist. Nothing matters anymore. And it's like a light switch. It's frightening, fascinating as well. But that's an aspect of the crude device. That's the aspect of what's going on. You could kind of compare that to an automobile that is an internal combustion engine. Well, you look at the engine and you say, well, fine, this is an internal combustion engine, but really it's running on gasoline, which is a more complicated aspect. So there's lots of ways to look at this, and we're never going to get anywhere if we keep going down these stupid roads that these people don't understand whatsoever. So there's a much higher frequency. These informational energetic fields form what is called the electromagnetic, which is a step down. Now, the point is that any real researcher understands that, as Hieronymus did, as Tesla did, and we're getting back into this kind of crude stupidity, which was started by Abrams. Abrams being a medical doctor and really not having a background in understanding these energies very well, obviously was open to it, but he was open to it because there were no pharmaceuticals at that time. So, and he was able to have the time and money to do this like few other people did because he was so wealthy. He was respected in the medical fields, but the bottom line is that he was building stuff that made no sense, just like Bruce Copen. When these instruments, and of course there's many of them still out there in museums and other places, and they've all looked in there, and there's nothing in there. When they do take these apart, they found very simple electronics, just like Copen did by putting in a surplus CD-ROM board in his one-dial unit that had no effects whatsoever. Abrams put in these kind of very primitive leftover electronics. There were doorbells, there were this, there that, because it was a tuning device, but he had to put something in there. And if you're going to sell things to doctors, they're going to have to be opening it up and seeing a whole bunch of box of wires, just like you get from so many things, to give it credibility. Now, if you open up a machine and it's simplistic, everybody thinks that this is just a joke, that it doesn't work. Well, again, that's low-level silly thinking. Now, that's the type of machines that are non-electric, that don't really have much in them, are the ones that were developed by Ruth Drown after going through the silliness. And she had apparently the inside track, being his secretary, that the wiring in these machines, at least the later machines by Abrams, was all a joke. So there were complicated machines, there were frequency machines, there's all sorts of things that Abrams already put out, and they're in different stages, and these were serious medical doctors. And if you read their journals that we have for sale on our website, you'll see how they're very technical medical speaking documents, his newsletters. These were for doctors. He was going to put together a hospital and other things, but never really got there. Now, I just don't understand if something is such a potent healer while everybody's dying so young. We can talk about all of them, from the past goofball of the goofiest organization ever on the planet, the U.S. Psychotronic Association, Peter Moscow. He died young, and he was a big healer talking about all these great things. Abrams died young. I think Ruth Drown only made it to 75 or so. There was talk that maybe she was poisoned. Who knows? All of these people, we have to be very cognizant of what's going on. But only Hieronymus has lived to be is the only person who's, I think he lived to be 91 or 2 that way. Now, this may just because of the fact that he had better genes. But his machines tend to not have the kickback as well. Certainly, Ruth Drown was under great pressure, and at the time of her death, she was looking at a actual court case, and I believe her daughter got prison time. So it turned into a very nasty thing with Ruth Drown, and her death stopped any of that. But they did go after other people in her company, including her daughter. So again, I would love to make a movie about all this stuff, and we'd love to get into this. There's bits and pieces of this stuff everywhere, and it certainly would be cool to put something down about her. De La War, another fascinating story, supposedly going to court and curing the wife of a judge of a serious illness. Bruce Copen. And of course, it was the American Ruth Drown who saved the industry, bringing it over to England, where they were able to get away with things, which you couldn't get away with in the United States. So, I mean, these are fascinating stories to anybody who's into this industry. And everybody that's been a pioneer in this industry has added to the bigger pieces of